then that chemistry stage when you fell in what you thought was love, but was probably lust, right? You saw each other and thought, that looks good, I'd like a little piece of that. And that's how you got together. You then get to, after the friendship stage, you get to what I've recently termed the tipping point. And I found that at around between 20 and 30 years of marriage, you actually get into a habit. You're in the habit of being married, and you're probably going to make it from that stage on. And then finally, the ultimate goal, growing old together. So just a little bit about this true love stage, this friendship stage. Scott Peck, a famous psychiatrist, defined love as one's willingness to expend energy for another's spiritual growth. And I love that definition, because there's nothing about sex in that. There's nothing about selfishness in that. It's really about being a really, really good friend. And I think the best friends in the world actually facilitate personal growth in each other. And one of the fun things to consider is, if you truly loved someone, wouldn't you want them to grow into who they really are? And the acid test here is that they may grow into someone that you don't particularly like, or that's not ideally who you'd want to be with. Dr. De Martini defines love as occurring at the cusp of challenge and support. You see, we need unconditional love in our relationships, as well as tough love. So whether you're in a love relationship, whether you're a parent, whether you're a boss, you really need to get a very clever balance of challenge and support. Sometimes you need to be supportive, sometimes you need to be challenging, but you can't be one or the other. So if you're only supportive, you become like a doormat, and nobody really respects you. And if you're overly challenging, you burn the other person out, and they leave. So in my opinion, a friendship is when you accept somebody for who they really are, when you know someone so well, both their good and bad, the light and the dark, and just accept them for who they are and remain best friends forevermore. So, I like to just speak about friendship, and I'd like to ask each one of you, if you believe you married your best friend, or if you believe that you are currently in a relationship with your best friend. And then I'd like to define, I hope a lot of you said yes, because it is a kind of a trick question, right? And then I'd like to just define a friendship. In my opinion, I like to give an example. Let's say my friend Mark comes to me and he says, Stephen, I was really bad the other day. I had a couple of beers and I snorted cocaine and I drove home, and that was very bad. And I'd say, well, Mark, that's really bad. That's really naughty. You really shouldn't do that. But I still love you. You're still my friend. And a week later or 2 weeks later, Mark comes again and he says, Stephen, I've messed up again. I'm really bad. What have you done? And he says, a bit of a cliche. I went to a pub and I chatted up the barmaid or whatever, and we landed up in the back of the car having sex. And as you know, I'm married, and that's very bad. And I go, well, Mark, that's really bad. You really shouldn't do that. You are married to Mary. She'd be really upset, and it's really bad of you. But I still love you, and you're still my friend. So the $1 million question is, how many of you could do that for your partner? Is your marriage only as strong as one mistake? Or would you find it in your heart to actually accept that people are human, people make mistakes, and indeed your best friend, your partner, is a human being just moving along this journey called life, and trying to make the best of what comes their way. So I encourage you all to be really great friends to your partners, and facilitate the personal growth in them that makes them more themselves. The next concept I love speaking about is the concept of money, sex, and power. And these are actually the three drives that all of us human beings will struggle with in our lives. And these will wreak havoc in our relationships. So it's a bit of an esoteric teaching, so forgive me for that, but I'm going to give it to you. the teaching really is that there are three drives: money, sex, and power. One of them will be your biggest drive, and then the next one will be your second, and the next one your third. So they'll actually rank in your life, and we have all of them. We all have this drive to earn money. We have this drive for sexuality or relationships, and then we have this drive for power. And power is often about just feeling significant, and also it's around being in control and being in charge. So in life, you know the money people. Okay, money people they eat, sleep, drink money. They just they sneak their own popcorn and cold drinks into the movies so that they can rather invest that money somewhere else. I like to think on, the negative and positives around this. So, if you have a lot of money, you're able to do a lot of good. But somebody who fell for this one, I like to remember Hansi Cronje and the match fixing thing. He fell to that money temptation. And the next one is sex, and especially if you're female, you'll know the guys that have sex high on their values. They're always hitting on you, and they never take no for an answer. And the sexual innuendos are always there, and everything has a sexual connotation, and that's what drives them. They're probably flirty, etc., etc. And of course, we can't not remember our good friend Bill Clinton in this regard. So he fell for that temptation around sex. And then power is a fun one. Power actually is the difficult one. And to be honest with you, this is the area that Jackie and I, my wife and I, struggle with. So power is around being significant, but it's also, in a relationship, who makes the decisions and who's really the head of the family, and how you deal with each other. And of course, when the children come along, it makes it even more interesting, because kids are very clever. They will divide and conquer if you allow them to. I like to think, Julius Malema and Zuma at the moment are really examples of power, but also like the example of Oprah Winfrey, for example. She's very powerful. If she loves your book and mentions that on a Sunday night, the next day, Monday, you sell 1 million copies. So there are positives and negatives with it. So these are the three things you're actually going to argue about in your relationship. So in terms of money, firstly, one of you will earn more and one of you will earn less. And the money, sex and power actually are all interrelated, because very often the person who earns the most money believes they have more authority on how it's spent. So the arguments you'll have here are, why can you play golf for 2,000 Rand on Saturday and then you moan at me for having a haircut for 600 or 800 or 1,000? In actual fact, most marriages fail due to money issues. And it's not about who earns the most. It's about how the money is worked with and inequalities in the money. So one of the things, or two of the things that Jackie and I have in this area, the first is it's almost like being in a business. I have an authority level, and I can spend 2.5 grand without your permission, and vice versa. But, if I need to spend more, like the other day I was at Macro and I wanted to buy a PA system, it was about 3.5 grand. I SMS'd her, I told her what it was, and I said, permission to go ahead. And I waited until I got that permission before doing so. We also have what we call pocket money. So what we do is we have a budget. It's very, very detailed budget. We know exactly how much money comes in, how much money goes out, and what's left at the end of the month. But part of that is an amount that I'm allowed to spend and an equal amount that she's allowed to spend. And I don't ask her what she spends it on, and she doesn't ask me what I spend it on. The important thing here is that it's an equal amount. It's immaterial which one of us earns more. At the end of the day, we have income, we have expenses, and then we agree what we do with what's over at the end of the day. The sexual area is always fun. It's actually such an important part of marriage. People don't really understand. I know there are all sorts of taboos about it, and you're not supposed to speak about it, etc., etc. But I do a lot of counseling, and very often, once again, one of you will want more sex, one of you will want less. One of you would want to be a little bit more let's call it sensual or kinky, and the other one would want to be a little bit more conservative. And there's no couple on earth that are perfectly matched in this area. There's always one that would want something a little bit different or a little bit more. So what you're going to argue about here is how often we have sex, who initiates it, who's on top, do we add toys, do we add friends, etc., etc. Yes, that was a joke, and usually when I have a live audience I can see people laughing, so I hope you're having a little chuckle right now. In the power area, this is around authority, and this is around being controlling. Once again, one of you will be more powerful than the other. One of you will be the boss, and one of you will be subservient. It's actually quite interesting. There was somebody once said that every relationship is a battle for power, and I would keep tabs on this area of your life very carefully all the way through your relationship, because power actually vacillates. Dr. DeMartini speaks about in a relationship there's usually an underdog and an overdog. The underdog sees more value in the overdog and generally wants to get married and tie them down into a relationship, where the overdog's got the power. They usually have more value in some way or other, and so the power is more on their side. What does happen though is, and I've dealt with married couples and engaged couples, in theory the man's the head of the house, right? Well, I've never seen that work in any marriage. Generally, you actually find that it's the woman that has the power and is, in a ways, controlling to ensure that the family runs smoothly. So you'll have lots of arguments around power and authority, and especially when the children arrive. Because, Jackie and I had a rule with Victoria that if one of us said no, the other one backed them up. So unfortunately that one backfired on me, because I'm an introvert and Jackie's an extrovert. So when Victoria asked something, Jackie answered immediately while I was still thinking about it. And very often